Hello, it's Wednesday night, 10 o'clock p.m. Time for Sex Talk with Natasha. We should have a little jingle. Ellen, come on dancing.
Exactly.
Anyway, the jingle can be, let's talk about sex, baby, because that's what we're going to talking about tonight. So that should be our jingle, although we'll probably get sued if we use it. So anyway. I digress as usual.
You know what? It's a Wednesday night.
Wednesday night after Memorial Day weekend. So,
there you go.
And I'm traveling tomorrow, so I'm struggling, people. Hang in there with me. Hang in there. So, all right. Yeah, tonight we're going to talk about how to talk about sex with our significant other, our partner, our spouse, our long-term partner, whomever it is that you're trying to have a sexual experience with. And but before we get to the topic, I just always want to give a little bit of information about Sex Talk with Natasha. I am a certified sex therapist. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been working with couples and individuals and people all over the spectrum as far as orientation and libido and erotic preferences, and you name it, I've probably seen it. You don't really impress me these days. In other words, you're not probably going to shock me or surprise me these days. Although, if you want a challenge, you can always. Anyway, I have been doing this for over 20 years. I love doing this work. I love helping couples and individuals claim their sexuality, work on their sexual health, their sexual values, reclaim their own sexuality from a lot of what our culture or our upbringings have kind of instilled in us. And a lot of those things are what I call hang-ups. So we try to really kind of help have comprehensive adult sexual education on this show on a variety of topics. And we're always looking for guests. So if you have something that you want me to address, please consider joining us. And you can do so anonymously or in person. Tonight, our guest is in person. So thanks so much, Julie, for being with us. And the subscription part of Sex Talk with Natasha includes a lot of different things that I am really excited about and hoping that you'll tap into. So we have some daily actions for you that pretty much go out almost every day, unless I'm traveling or have internet connections. We have blog posts that you can read. We've got homework assignments. We've got resources. We are currently developing an online parenting class, and about every month or two, we're releasing another segment of that. And I think we're pretty close to releasing number 5 or 6.
Yep, really soon.
Yeah, so lots of things, and depending on what level you want to subscribe at, you'll get different options of how you'll benefit from the kind of this ongoing journey of sexuality, which is how I like to look at it. I don't think we necessarily address our sexuality in a weekend or in a session, although professional help can obviously be very helpful for short-term things and also longer-term things. And but I think that it's helpful to have something that you're kind of looking at on a regular basis. And that's why I want to make this cost-effective and hopefully helpful for all of you. I'm always open to feedback. Would love to hear from any and all of you that want to share your thoughts. What's been helpful about Sex Talk so far for you? What are you hoping I would do that I haven't done, etc. So with that, I will turn it over to Ashley Pacini, who is the show's producer and helps me manage all of this techno stuff and, just helps me run things smoothly. So Ashley, take it away.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you everybody for joining. We always love coming on here, no matter where we are. Natasha's done it from Utah, I think, from Kansas, obviously. You've just done it from anywhere.
Yes.
And so it's great.
Taking the road on the show. We'll be taking the show on the road again these following weeks.
Exactly. So if anything, just stay tuned to see where Natasha is next. We should put up a map and but we really love doing this. And so we really want to bring some great stuff to you guys. And so for those that are just joining, and as a recap for anybody that is returning, it's an hour program. The first about 15-20 minutes, Natasha is going to teach us some stuff and give us some education. And then for the next 20-25 minutes or so, we'll then bring on our guest. And tonight we have Julie, who's great. And then at the end, we always want to make sure that we have time for your questions. So please feel free to send us your questions. We'll do it like the last 10, 15 minutes. You can email us at sextalkwithnatasha@gmail.com for any patrons. You can direct message us. Let's see, we're on Facebook. We're on all the social medias. Just shoot us a message with your questions. We'll definitely get to them. And as Natasha said, there's great resources that we have for you. You can check out everything on our Patreon page over at patreon.com/sextalkwithnatasha. And for anybody that is interested in seeing Natasha professionally, you can check her out at her online practice, which is Symmetry Solutions. And you can find that at symmetrysouls.com. That's symmetrysouls, SOLS.com. So without further ado, I'll turn it back over to Natasha.
Thank you, Ashley. And one thing that you mentioned last week that I really appreciated was this, because Patreon is kind of like a Facebook page, so things can kind of get lost over time. You know, it's kind of like an ongoing thread. So we have, well, Ashley has kindly organized all of the content at the sextalkwithnatasha.com page. So everything that's been, you know, kind of put together so far is kind of neatly organized over there, so that if you're interested in a certain topic or looking for a certain resource that I mentioned, more than likely you'll be able to find it on that page. And I also want to remind people that one of the greatest benefits, I think, of subscribing and becoming a subscriber is that it gives you access to contacting me directly. So you can email me a question directly, privately if you want to. You can use the community page, kind of like you would on Facebook, and share ideas or thoughts with other subscribers. And so I just think that that's a really great benefit of the program, because not only can you learn from me directly, but you can learn from each other. All right, so let's talk about how to talk about sex. You know, I really could spend probably like 5 weeks straight talking about this topic. So it was really hard for me to just kind of, you know, snap out a few pointers, bullet points that I want to address to try to at least help you start having some techniques or strategies or foundations from where you can get started that I see a lot of people struggling with right off the bat. So my first set of bullet points is actually going to be bullet points where I consider it setting the stage. And then my next set of bullet points is going to be more about, okay, so then once the stage is set, how do we actually go about the talking piece? So so the first step is setting the stage. And I think sometimes we decide to talk about sex, or we're figuring out that we wish we would have talked about sex while we're having sex. And this can be a really awkward time. If you're in the middle of something, it maybe feels like, oh, am I going to be offensive? Am I going to turn this other person off? Am I going to kill the mood? Am I going to mess up kind of the flow that we're going in? And so a lot of people stay quiet during those moments, which isn't super great, and or never revisit it outside of the bedroom. So I think, especially when it comes to sexual negotiations, these can be great conversations to have outside of an erotic sexual setting. So maybe go out to dinner or plan a nice evening at home, or, you know, go on a ride together, like a drive, you know, in the car. That way you can avoid eye contact if you need to, if it's really hard. So that's good with teenagers, by the way. Anyway, so, but it works too sometimes when we're super ultra nervous about something. So set the stage, and sometimes you can even write some things down. Sometimes some people are better at writing and kind of gathering their thoughts, and so you can refer to some written notes as you're trying to talk to your partner, and make sure that you're letting your partner know that this is a vulnerable thing that you're asking for. Like, you know, hey, this is hard for me to talk about. I don't really know how to do it. I'm hoping I don't mess it up. I hope I don't put you on the defensive. And so can you just bear with me and just kind of sit for a minute and let me kind of gather my thoughts. And then, you know, I'd love to hear your responses, but just kind of bear with me. Let them know that you're taking a risk, a vulnerability risk. Okay, so the second pointer that I have on setting the stage, which really has to do with a lot of your own self-education, is understanding that you and your partner are primarily, when it comes to, you know, sexual libidos, sexual preferences, things of that nature. You are anatomical, complex beings that have very little control about what turns you on, when you're turned on, how often you're turned on. And so I think a lot of times we come at these topics from a stance of woundedness, like there must be something I'm doing wrong, or there must be something that you're not prioritizing, or you don't care about me, whatever it is. If we can just start from this perspective of you are, you know, a being full of hormones and background things and personality traits and just even physical body parts that are different from mine, right? Or different from mine. Even if you're in a same-sex relationship, you still are very different. Just because you have the same anatomy does not mean that you really have the same anatomy. So you're coming at this from a space where just normal self, the way that you just show up, is going to be different than your partner. And we don't have to, you know, attribute a lot of other things to that, which of course goes into my next bullet point, which is really avoiding what I call meaning ruts. And these are the things that we assume the problem is about. So if what turns me on doesn't turn you on, and I tell you about it and you're not willing to engage in that with me, that must mean that, you know, fill in the blank. That must mean there's something wrong with me. That must mean there's something wrong with you. That must mean that you don't care about me, or that you don't prioritize me, or that we are sexually incompatible, or who knows what meanings we attribute to actually a very normal part of life, which is we're different. So avoiding meaning ruts can be a really helpful thing to think about in the foundation of starting conversations. You know, what meanings am I aware that I'm attributing to this? My next one is just checking your own ego. I think that all of us are somewhat sexually fragile. I think this has a lot to do with just the inadequacies of sexual education that all of us come from, and all the expectations that have been piled upon us by, you know, ideas such as, what does it mean to be sexy? What does it mean to have successful sex? What does it mean to have a healthy sexual relationship? So when you come with all these expectations, but zero knowledge on how to negotiate or talk about sexuality, you can see how the stage is set for it to be easy for us to be wounded, right? So like, wait, you didn't like that I did that? You know, or I'm protecting you because I don't want you to be sad about the fact that I didn't like what you did. So we really need to kind of be willing to listen and to understand that we're not just all naturally good lovers. We're all just not naturally really anything, that these are skills and these are things that we need to work at and improve, and we can always improve upon, and that will be different depending on the partner you're with, right? So you may have to relearn things or be willing to re-engage in different ways if, you know, if you're with a new partner all of a sudden. The other thing that I just want to talk about, since the terms healthy sex were mentioned in the question, you know, how do we negotiate a healthy sexual relationship, is just a reminder of the 6 principles of sexual health. These are great foundational principles. And why I like them is because they're really not morally laden. So a lot of times healthy sexuality, especially in a heteronormative, you know, kind of binary culture, we see that as, you know, you have to be monogamous, you have to be in a committed relationship, you have to be in a heterosexual relationship, or you have to, you know, there's all these have-tos about how we see healthy sexuality. And sometimes things like kink or casual sex or different ways that people want to be sexual are automatically put in an unhealthy category. So what I like about the 6 principles of sexual health is that they really kind of, they kind of make the playing field even, because they apply to a married, you know, kind of vanilla sex partnership. They apply to a kink, casual sex, you know, encounter. That it's not dependent on who you're having sex with or in what context. It's more dependent on what and how are we going about this process? And so those 6 principles, which I'll just share with you very quickly, are consent, non-exploitation, protection from STIs and unwanted pregnancy, honesty, shared values, and mutual pleasure. And so I think that having that as your foundation before you even start to talk will be very helpful to come back to, when we come into some issues or some disagreements, which principle might help us kind of negotiate this further. Okay, so those are my setting the stage ideas. As far as ideas on how to actually talk, and I kind of referred to this in the meeting reads thing, but really, really, really try to avoid the blame game. And the blame game isn't just about blaming your partner, it's also about blaming yourself. I see so many people coming into my office who are so critical of themselves. That there must be something wrong with me, that why don't I, I want to want desire. I want to want what my partner wants. What's wrong with me? Fix me. This whole I'm broken type of approach. And of course, there are the ways too that we blame our partners. You're too this or you're too that, or what's wrong with you? And basically what we're asking is, why are you wired differently than me? And so that's nobody's fault. And so if we can really try to catch ourselves from that blame game dilemma that I call it, and it's very easy to get into, that will be a very useful thing as you're trying to discuss some of these things. The other, a bullet point I have around talking is realistic expectations, which also goes along with the word negotiation. Negotiation kind of implies that ain't nobody gonna be happy. I mean, really, that's what it kind of implies. You're not gonna get your way. It means that you're gonna get something that is somewhat hopefully comfortable to the two of you, but you have a partner who does not have your erotic preferences. You have a partner who does not have your sexual drive. You have a partner who has sexual background and history and experiences that you do not have. So you're not going to be able to necessarily come to a place where everything, is just hunky-dory and I'm 100%, happy. And that is what compromise and negotiation is about. So I always try to remind couples, this isn't about getting, walking away like, oh, I'm totally happy. It's about, well, I'm somewhat comfortable, on a scale from 1 to 10, where 10 is like deal breaker. I'm so uncomfortable. This is a deal breaker. If we're at like a 4 or 5 with some issues, that's really reasonable. That's okay. That's an okay place to be. And then let's see. So my last point, well, I have 2 points. One is remember to talk about process. So as you're talking about oral sex, for example, we can get very clued into oral sex and know, I'm talking about this or that, or, when you touch my penis this way, or when you do this, instead of really at that moment, especially when you're feeling frustrated, it's like, whoa, let's just like, take a deep breath. And can I clue you into my process, which has nothing to do with the penis or vagina or oral sex at that moment. It has to do, well, it might, because you might tune into that part of your body, but talk about the process. So in other words, I can feel my heart racing. I can feel my jaw tightening. I can feel myself getting defensive. And I just want to clue you into what this experience is like for me. A lot of times when we can offer that type of process check, it helps us de-escalate a conversation that otherwise can just, run to the races. So I think having process talk is something that I practice a lot with couples in my office. And the last point I'll say that can really be helpful in talking about this, especially when you're in negotiation mode, is really understanding the difference between spontaneous desire and responsive desire. So most of the time, the conflicts arise with what spontaneously happens for me does not spontaneously happen for you. And so if I have a certain frequency, like I'm horny right now, well, maybe you're not. So then, well, what's wrong with you? Get horny. Like, what? Just can you fix that so that I can be happy? Or, or, you know, so I guess what I'll say is that oftentimes the higher libido partner experiences more spontaneous desire, or the person who's more interested in certain erotic preferences, that happens spontaneously. That's not hard. That's not difficult. It's happening. What's hard is that your partner isn't going along for the ride. And so what you're asking your partner to do in that moment is to tap into responsive desire, which is an okay thing to tap into, which means it's not happening naturally. Maybe I'm willing to engage. And as I engage and as I go into that willingness, at some point, probably arousal will happen for me too. But you have to understand that if a lower libido partner is willing to do that, well, where are you willing to also do that responsive desire in areas that are not spontaneous for you? And oftentimes what I find is that, you know, a higher libido partner might be very spontaneous about having sex, but may not be spontaneous about having initial conversations, right? Or may not be very spontaneous about giving a massage that does not end in the sexual encounter, right? There's just cuddling. So you have to really look at it from the perspective of both of us have room, both of us have things that just spontaneously feel good. This is how I am, this is what I like, this is what comes naturally to me. And if you'd help me out with that, that would be great. But both of us also have things that are probably not going to come naturally. And for those things, you really have to look inner and say, what am I willing to do that's intentional and that's planned and that's even in my calendar? So I remember, because remember, it's not happening spontaneously for you, where I remember that this is something that's important to my partner. And so that can be a really helpful thing to help couples negotiate some of these sexual hurdles that they're trying to compromise on. All right, so like I said, that's scratching the surface on a lot of different stuff. And I have really no idea, Julie, what the heck you want to talk about as far as what you're wanting to talk to your spouse about. But that's where we're going to go next. So Ashley, do you want to bring Julie on?
Yeah, and just as a reminder to those on Facebook, we'll go with the feed for another 5-10 minutes, but then we're going to cut it off. So you can head over to Patreon though to get the entire episode, patreon.com/sextalkwithnatasha. But we'll go ahead and pull Julie on now. Welcome, Julie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of
I'm
course.
so glad to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
So give us just a tad bit of history. I think you told me you were married, but yeah, give us a little bit about who you are and where you're coming from.
Yep, so my name's Julie, and I've been married to my husband for 10 years. And we've just always kind of struggled in this area a little bit. A little background, we both grew up in kind of Orthodox religion, and we were virgins when we got married, so we'd never been with anybody else. And so I feel like a lot of our sexual experiences and beliefs associated with that have kind of been more what we've learned from other people, not necessarily like what we've negotiated together. And so I think that's been like a really difficult thing, because sometimes I look at our expectations and it's like, well, those my expectations, or those like expectations that others have given to us. And so that's kind of just been a little bit of a struggle for us to kind of break that down to say, okay, well, what is our experience? What do we want? What is normal for us? You know, and just kind of, I think that's what I'm really wanting to learn is like, how do you figure out like what is normal for you? Because I kind of approach it from that place of brokenness, where it's like, okay, I've been taught my whole life that girls are the lower libido partner, but yet I'm the higher libido partner and he's the lower one. So what's wrong with me? What's wrong with him? You know, and it's like you just start placing blame on yourself and the other person. And it's just been really hard to just wipe that away and say, okay, let's just scratch everything and let's rebuild this together. And so we've been, you know, practicing that, but I still feel like it's been challenging, especially now that, you know, we're not part of Orthodox religion anymore. And it's, I mean, honestly, that's another hard part, because some of the things that I've been taught are scary or terrible or you shouldn't do, that it's like, well, can we like experiment? Can we do these things, like, or is it going to cause problems or addictions, you know? And so maybe it just helped negotiating that as well, to figure out like what works for both of us, because I think there's a lot of cultural barriers that we're trying to work through too.
Okay, you just said 10 different things. I want to get like my
I know.
I'm like, ooh, I'm so excited.
Me too.
All right. So a few things. First of all, I think a really good place to start, especially if you're about 10 years in. 10 years is about a really good magical number. So if you're about 10 years into a relationship, that might be a really good time to pause and say, huh, wow, we've been married for 10 years. We probably did the best we knew how.
Yeah,
Right?
totally.
Royally screwed some things up along the way. And so
No pun intended.
we're in some patterns, right? That are maybe some holding patterns that we don't currently find useful. On top of it, you're mentioning a faith transition, which can be quite, that's its own thing that can oftentimes, bring sexuality to the forefront in a different way. So what were our sexual values in this context? What are our sexual values now? Is there room for experimentation in ways that we are interested in, etc. So I guess I just want to start with the suggestion that maybe you figure out some type of ritual, just the two of you. And I don't know what you do. I mean, rituals can be all kinds of crazy and fun, right? But maybe you you go to a pool and swim into a pool, kind of like you're cleansing yourself, and you're like, 10 years, that we've been trying to navigate a sexual relationship together with very little information given to us. Both of us were somewhat non-experienced when we came into the marriage sexually. Although don't let that deter you, because having sex before you're married, there are plenty of those people on my couch too that are so I always tell people, like, don't assume that those who waited are having a better sex life, and don't assume that those who didn't wait are having a better sex life. Like, everybody has sexual issues, or problems and negotiations. So again, that's kind of, just challenge that stereotype. But so maybe just start out and just have that compassion for each other. Like, let's look at I don't know how old you were when you got married, but let's say you were 23, or 25. Let's look at that 23-year-old self and go, huh, what a sweet young lady. Let's look at that young man and go, what a sweet young man. And look at their aspirations and all the expectations they had about life, and they didn't know what was coming, right? And boy, we survived a lot in 10 years. So just kind of trying to separate yourself a little bit from those younger versions of yourself that really probably were trying to do the best they could with very limited information, lots of stereotypes and negative influences from either Orthodox religion or the media or culture or even family issues, depending on where you come from. So, and as much as possible, that ritual can be at least symbolically a blank slate. I mean, obviously there is no such thing as a blank slate, but at least that's the intention, right? That we can start a new journey 10 years in, knowing what we've known. What have we learned? What do we know about each other? What are our trigger points? What are we afraid of? What do we actually do well? What actually has worked out? What stereotypes has our relationship challenged? Like, the higher libido person is usually the husband. That's not actually necessarily that true at all. There's lots of women that are the higher libido partner. So, and then, maybe even have like a grieving exercise, like we're sorry that you came into this relationship with all of that misinformation, right? So that's maybe a starting point. And I really want to talk about experimentation. And you mentioned the word addictive. And I want to talk about how to move forward in being able to talk about things that are currently uncomfortable for you. So, but I'm pretty sure Ashley's leaning in because it's like time to go.
That's the cue.
For Facebook to
That's
go.
the cue.
Please join us over at Patreon. You can subscribe right now, right in the next 2 minutes, and keep joining us. Plus, catch all the other live Facebook events that we've had. They're all tucked away for your enjoyment.
It's all there. It's all there, staying up there forever. Thanks, Facebook.